Hello, I'm Alan, welcome to the Guitar Shack. So today's video, I thought it would be interesting to do a quick comparisons video to show you the differences between some very similar looking Telecasters. So these are three guitars that I've got in stock, which I'm going to be putting through my full restoration and setup and deep clean process, and then I'll be selling them on in my reverb shop. So this one is a 2010 Mexican Standard. So this is your sort of bog standard Mexican 2000 through till 2015, I think they were. So modern appointments, 6 saddle bridge, single coils, three-way switch, and modern sealed tuners. These are kind of the workhorse of the Telecaster world, really. Really good guitars. Block saddles and ceramic pickups. So typically these are things which get upgraded. The pickups, because a lot of people don't like them. Some people do. So we'll have a look at that as we strip it down. This is the next generation on. So this is a 2018 Player Series. So this replaced that. So it'll be interesting to have a look at what the differences are. I mean, the main ones are the pickups were upgraded to Alnico 5s on these. They're very similar in other respects. Some things were in advance, some things were actually retrograde as far as I'm concerned. So we could talk about that. And then just for interest, this is a 2010 USA Standard. So this is basically the next step up from that, from the same year. So we'll look at what you get as extra when you used to pay the difference for the USA versus the Mexican back then. And interestingly, the differences between this as a 2010 USA and that as the Player Series, which kind of bridged the gap along the way in terms of specification, but some important differences as well. So I'm going to strip them all down. As we look at each section, we will get into what are the differences between the three guitars, and then I'll have a look at them once they're all fully done, and we'll get up close and see. Okay, so just get into some of the comparisons then. We'll start off with the headstocks. So it's mainly about two things. One is that all the Mexicans have got this black plastic insert to the truss rod, whereas on the US Standard and on all USA necks, you've got this walnut plug, which is thicker, lighter in colour, and is quite a giveaway. So if you ever see one that claims to be a USA and it doesn't have this plug, then be very, very suspicious. But mainly the changes are actually in the logo itself. So this is the earliest one I've got. This is a 2007 Mexican, and as you can see, it's got the serial number on the front, and then it says Made in Mexico under the Telecaster script. The other thing is the font for the logo itself, which is thicker and is silver inside. We then move on to this is a Mexican 2010 model, so it's contemporary with the USA one. It's changed the logo, so it's now got black logo with gold light writing, and the serial number and the Made in Mexico have moved to the back. And then the other thing about these two is that they've got a kind of satin finish on the headstock, whereas when we move to the Player Series, which is a 2018 model, it's got what they call a spaghetti logo, I believe, which is a slimmer font in a sort of gold colour with Telecaster. So again, it's got the serial number and the Made in Mexico on the back. And as you can see, it's got a glossy finish. And then compare that to the USA model, which is pretty much the same font or similar font, slightly bigger Telecaster, but silver logo with Made in USA. And as I said before, it's got the walnut plug. So moving around the back in the same sequence. So 2008, plain on the back. It's got the standard block tuners that they've all got. There may be a difference in the USA one. I believe they're supposed to be higher quality tuners, but they look exactly the same, so I remain unconvinced, although somebody can probably put me right on that. 2010, as you can see, we moved to MX10, and that's printed on the back with a made in Mexico. That stays the same with the Player series, so they do the same thing there. It looks identical. And then on the USA model, so the serial number is on the back. And then the other difference with that is that the skunk strike is walnut, matching the headstock. That's a lighter colour than on the others. I don't know what the material is, but it looks lighter. And then the other difference is that on the 2008 Mexican and the 2010, it's got plain bridge plates. Then if we move on to the Player series, that's when they started putting the blinged up F in the middle. And then finally, the US has got Fender Corona California, so it's got the USA bridge plate, and it's got the hole for the micro tilt. So that's visually the differences. As you can see, everything else is pretty much of a muchness. There is one other fundamental difference between them. So if we look at the necks and then measure the width of the neck just in front of the nut, so it's the neck itself that I'm measuring. You can't see it because of the light, but on the Mexicans it's 42 millimeters, whereas if you measure the USA one in the same place, again you probably can't see it, but it's 42.9. So basically it's a millimeter wider across the width of the neck. And the reason why that's important is actually the shaping, which you might be able to see. There is much more rolling to the edge of the fingerboard on the USA than on this one. Now, this is the maple necked 2010, but they are broadly the same for all the Mexican ones. They are much tighter radius of over the edge of the fingerboard, so they're not really rolled at all. Now, none of that might matter to you if you're not bothered about rolled edges, and lots of people aren't. It's not an issue for a lot of people. Me, I'm quite into having comfortable edges. So on my own guitars, I do tend to roll the edges. And this is one of my own. This is a Mexican neck, which has had the edges rolled, which is a lot easier to do on a rosewood neck than it is on a maple neck because of the finish. But the reason that is important is this. If I measure this from the outside edge across the strings, you're basically looking at 35.9 mil on a 43 millimeter neck. If I measure it on this one, I'm still 35.8 mil, same string spacing, but that's on a 42 millimeter neck. So what that basically means is that the real estate outside the string to the edge of the neck is narrower, and therefore you've got less that you can roll over before you've potentially got the string can slide off the edge of the neck. So I'm always pretty careful about how far I go with doing it. And it can be done, and I don't find that this string does slip off. But that's just one of the things that you need to bear in mind, that you've got more, well, A, the edges aren't rolled, and B, you don't have that much room to maneuver, if that's important to you with the Mexican necks. Okay, so moving around the front of the guitar, the first difference is that in the Made in Mexico standards, so this is the 2008 and this is the 2010, they're both 21 fret necks, whereas the Player series, this was introduced in 2016, I think they were, this is a 22 fret neck, which is the same as the USA. So that's the most obvious difference in which one you're looking at. And then the other difference is that on the earlier Mexican bridges, they came with, well, all the Mexicans have got 4 bridge screws under here. You can't see them at the moment. You will do when I strip it down. but basically they've got the same spacing and screw pattern as vintage bridges, and that's important because these are really easy. It's a straight swap out for vintage bridges if you like your three saddles. So if we move on to the player series, this was a 2018, so one of the early release models, and these came with these bent steel saddles, which are sort of traditional Fender Strat type saddles. Now, there was an issue with them at launch, which was that the bridge placement wasn't quite right for them, and people were complaining in that when you went to change a string, basically you've got to push the saddles back in order to be able to get the string through. And as a result of that, in the later player series, they changed them back to these ones, which is why you see two different types. I've never personally had an issue with these bent steel ones. All you have to do is just push the saddle back a little bit when you change strings. It's not the end of the world. But that's one of the other differences to look out for. And then this is the bridge of the USA model. So there's two major differences really. The first one is obviously, as you can see, the block saddles are machined out of stainless steel and are much higher quality, and they have these black springs. So although they look similar at a distance to the player series, these are very different. Whether they make a tonal difference or not is, a matter of internet debate. The other difference, significant difference, is that this is a 3-screw placement. So there's one there, and one there. So the bridges are not interchangeable between US and Mexican. And I think it's also true that there are fewer options if you did want to switch to a vintage style ashtray bridge. So that might be a consideration if you've got a USA model, you're thinking about getting a USA model, but you prefer the 3-saddle bridges. You might be better looking for more of a reissue style Telecaster rather than one of these. Okay, so I think that covers the external differences between them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get them all opened up. We'll have a look inside, and then I'll be continuing my process with each one. So what I do with all these guitars is I strip them right down, I clean everything, I clean all of the electronics, check them, make sure that everything's working. I will polish and then wax the bodies. I'll make any paint repairs that are necessary. So this player series has got a divot in the top, which I will drop fill. And then I will get into looking at the necks. Now on the necks, if they are in good condition, then I will just give them a really good polish, make sure the fretwork's correct. 9 times out of 10, I end up giving them a full level crown and polish just to get rid of any play wear that's on them. And then I'll get them all back together and give them a full setup. Okay, so here's them all de-strung. A couple of observations really. One is that you can't really see it in the video, but these are all basically as purchased, and it's not a criticism of the previous owners. It's just this is the reality of buying used guitars, is that all of them have got varying degrees of muck, dust and crud all over them. And the strings themselves were, in most cases, pretty black and ugly. So one of the reasons I do what I do is so that if you buy a guitar from me, everything has been cleaned to perfection and you know that it's in the best condition it can be. And then the second one is about fretwork, really. So you definitely won't be able to see it, but this is the 2008 Mexican, and the fret edges are all pretty decent. And even after, this is February in the UK, so it's been in a centrally heated house all winter, so it's drier, and you do get a bit of fret sprout, and I can definitely feel some sprout on the 2010 model, and then I can feel quite a lot of sprout on the player series. And one of the things that I've noticed, and this is just observation, I've got no data, but I find that Player Series necks, particularly the maple ones, are more susceptible to fret sprout than the earlier ones. I don't know if anybody else is finding that. Be interested in your experiences in the comments. But of course, with rolled edges on the US model, it's everything's still perfect. So, you know, one of the things I like a lot about the Player Series, but in my observation of both buying brand new ones and needing to do fretwork, particularly brand new necks for builds, which is what I tend to do, I do like them. They're good quality, but they always need fretwork. They always need the ends dressed, and there's usually one or two high frets, so I end up doing a full fret job on pretty much every Player Series neck that I get my hands on. And in my experience, that's not always been the case with the earlier MIM standards. So the next step in the journey is I'm going to get the necks off, and then we'll have a look at if there's any differences there, and then I'll get inside. All of these are as received, so I assume that they're all standard inside, but I haven't opened any of them up, so I guess we'll find out. So necks off. Looking first at the 2007, the Sunburst. Not a huge amount to say. It does have a date stamp, July 07. You can see that in the MIM standards, you've got what they call the Mickey Mouse ear routing. So rather, it's sort of a larger diameter router bit, sort of, and then comes straight across here. Whereas you'll see it's a bit different in the Player Series. There's no actual date on the neck itself, but as with all Fenders, it's got a barcode and a model number, so you can tell which part number it is. Much the same on the 2010, so no real changes. It doesn't have an actual date stamp on it. The same routing, and again, no actual date on the. Oh, there is a date on that one. Yeah, so that one does say 2010. So some do, some don't. And then on the Player Series, as you can see, the routing is slightly different because it's just a smaller diameter in the corner and straight across. Now, if I recall correctly, when they launched the Player Series, they said that it was a new body shape, and what they had done was they had changed the contouring and the radiuses of the corners to be more vintage correct. I can't tell the difference, to be honest. I've looked at them, but I really can't see it. I'm sure it's probably accurate. Maybe this bit here is slightly more curved, just in that kick there, compared to the earlier one. But you'd have to really be looking at it to tell. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. Obviously, the neck itself is a 22 fret neck, so you've got the overhang, not the hangover. That's a whole different thing. And then on the US, the obvious difference is that it has the micro tilt. So that means you don't have to shim it. You can go through there. You can put a raise on the back of the neck or not, just to get your neck angle perfect, which is a nice thing to have. Again, it's got the Mickey Mouse ear routing at the back, and the button on the back of the neck for the micro tilt is bigger. And interestingly, the actual shaping of the neck is just slightly more rounded than the heel on the Player Series, but they do actually interchange perfectly. The Player Series neck is a looser fit, but it is a fit. And then the US neck will fit into the Player Series nice and snugly. And I'm assuming it's fully interchangeable with the earlier MIMs as well. Yeah. So you wouldn't have any problem swapping any necks here. They're all completely standard. That's a nice tight fit. so that's what's inside the pockets. And now I'm going to get the guards off and get inside the bodies. Let's have a look, shall we? So, obvious differences, well, three obvious differences that I can see. So on the earlier MIM standards, we've got humbucker route and we've got three of the CNC routing holes. Same on this one. And then on the player series, we've also got a humbucker route, but we've only got one CNC hole with a little sticking in it. And on the USA, we've also got one. So there goes the theory that Mexicans have three and the USAs have one. But we've also got routing for a middle pickup if we wanted to make this into a Nashville. So that's the first difference. So the Mexicans have got full shielding paint, and that is earthed. So the pickup goes to the earth. And then on the player series, we've got a 3-wire pickup. So we've got a separate earth wire for the cover, which means that you can put a 4-way switch on these. Is there an earth? I can't see if there's an earth. I'll have a closer look. It doesn't look like the cavity is separately earthed, but it might be that it's actually there's continuity all the way through. It should be. And then interestingly, on the USA, it's not shielded cavity. Or maybe it is. Maybe it is, and it's just under the red paint. Yeah, I think it is. So I think it's been painted over the this has been painted over the shielding paint, which is there and is earthed. Okay, so that's what's there. So looking inside, and we see the same here. So we've got, on the USA model, we've got CTS, should be. Full-sized, obviously. And we've got metal switch. And then we've got earthing coming through. And yeah, so that's the same. We've also got full-size CTS pots on the player series. We've got the same, we've got a metal switch. This one is not the same switch. It is the same switch, it's the other way around. Okay, so we've got, looks like identical components on the player series and the US, as is also true on the Mexican. Functional small capacitor for the tone controls, same switch. CTS pots, shielded, and then yeah, same on this one. And we have in the US one, we've got one of those dished CTS pots as a volume control, and then we've got a flat topped one for the tone control. So I wonder if one of those has been replaced. Would seem to make sense, but it seems to be the same switch. Okay, so that's the wiring. So pickups are the difference really. So these are the Mexican standard ceramics. So we've got two bar magnets along the bottom. Pole pieces themselves are not magnets, they're just steel slugs. And they've got, you can see there's on the end, we've got mouldings for the screws to go into. So that's one of the differences between some of the other pickups that you sometimes see on Squires or MIJs. So same pickup on this one, identical. But then when we went to player series, that's when they went to these Alnico. see what, I'll try and focus and find out what the actual model number of that pickup is. Something, something, something 277. And then we've got what are also Alnico pickups on the US Standard. That one has got a screw in the bottom, and it's got moulded base plate, so it's plastic base plate, as is that. Those might actually be the same pickup. I will do some research, but internally, got to be honest, I've not seen a hell of a lot of difference between any of these. They're all plastic. They're all plastic bobbins, so there's nothing fancy here. They're all plastic shielding on the wiring. We don't have any of this sort of pushback cloth. And they've all got the same metal switches, CTS. So, I mean, in reality, I don't see there's a hell of a lot of difference here. So just have a quick look inside the pickguards. None of them are shielded. They don't really need to be because the pickup is. But on the MIM Standards, I've got a date stamp inside the pickguard of 13th of June 2007, which matches the neck pocket. On the maroon MIM Standard, which is 2010, we've got a very clear date stamp there in October 2010. On the player series, I've got nothing apart from a little squiggle from a quality inspector, I guess. And there's nothing inside the US either, apart from a comet, which has been to visit, which is nice. So, starting with the same order then. So, on the early Mexican, the 2008, we've got the ceramic pickups again, grounded onto the plate by a loop from the ground from the pickup to the base plate or to the bridge plate, and then into the cavity as well. Plastic, might be a metal plate in the bottom. Yeah, I think it is a metal plate on the bottom of the pickup, but with the ceramics. Got the same setup on the 2010, no differences there. Then we get to the player series, and we've got a similar grounding system. So pick up ground into the bridge plate, and then from the bridge plate into the control cavity. But these are Alnico pickups, and we've got a brass base plate on these, so a bit more traditional Tele at this point. And then on the USA, again, we've got a moulded bottom, which may have some metal in it. Not sure. Yeah, I think these are bonded on. So I think this is metal, and then we've got this screw. And then it's a more traditional ground wire, which just comes out and loops into the bare wire, or has a bare wire that sits underneath the bridge plate. So it's perfectly adequate, but a bit different. And then that grounding is into the body as well. So this is what is inside your Telecaster. Now, again, this is 2001, so 24 years old. This is 2018, so 7 years old. This is 2010, so 15 years old. And this is 2007, so 18 years old. So there's a whole bunch of crap in there, which you can clean out. Just reset the clock, basically, on the tarnishing. But I mean, overall, these are in pretty decent condition. They're just manky. They just need a good clean up. And that's basically what I will do with them. This one, the Sunburst, it's clearly at some point it's had some chipping of the finish, and as a result of that, somebody has decided that rather than drop fill it or just live with it, they have sanded it smooth for a relic approach. Now, I'm not a fan of relics, but if you are going to do a relic, don't start with a poly finished Telecaster, would be my view. Doesn't It's never going to look like an actually relic guitar. I mean, this one doesn't look bad because they've taken the time to smooth it out, sand it out, and then they haven't done anything worse. I have seen a few of them where they're really beaten up and distressed, and that just doesn't appeal to me at all. This one I'll decide what to do with. It might be that because all of this damage is contained within the black area of the Sunburst, I may decide to paint it, build up a finish on it, and then polish it in. It'll not be perfect because the contouring has changed a little bit, but it will certainly disguise it so that you'd need to be looking for it, and that'll bring it back to something a bit more smart. You know, some people would say just leave it in the first place. I might be tempted to agree with them, or I might just leave this. So that's the body's all done. Next up, I'm going to get the bridges, get them cleaned and back on, and then onto the neck. So we're on to the rest of the hardware now, which I quite enjoy. Not much to it, just making sure that all the saddle screws are functional and giving it a good degrease. This one's off the Sunburst, so this is 2008, but pretty clean, no issues. So, bit of my trusty lighter fluid, naphtha, and it just lifts all the grease and crap that it gets in the bridge, lifts it straight out. Yeah, voila! This one's quite interesting. It's the bridge plate is tarnished, and most of the silver or the chrome has now worn off it, and you can see that it's actually made of brass, which is quite nice. Which is one of the reasons why I didn't do any repairs to the paint, because it is actually getting on a bit, that guitar, and it is starting to relic naturally. Not much on the neck, which is in good shape, but you know, bits of this, and it just sort of, although I'm not a relic fan, it does sort of go with the vibe, so I'm going to leave that. I think it's okay. I think it suits it. So first things first, putting the bridge pickup back on and getting the ground on first. Because obviously it's the bit that's attached. So next thing up is the bridge screws. And an inquisitive dog. So there we go. First one down. Three to go. So that's the bodies done. So next up, we're getting into the necks. So starting with the 07, you can see the flame in the neck, which is nice. The frets still not too bad. They are a little bit worn up towards the top. We've got the standard cowboy chord wear, so I'm going to lightly crown and polish this. Next up is the 2010, which as you can see is quite badly oxidized on these frets. So the first thing I'm going to do is polish them and just see how badly worn they are. I don't think they're worn much at all, but it's kind of hard to tell under this crud. Nice flame though. Player series, as you might expect. Very little wear on this. It just needs a good clean and polish, I think. I don't see any particular wear that needs dealt with, but it's a bit manky. And you can obviously see the gloss finish on this neck. And then on the USA. Now this one is interesting. It's been leveled before, I would suggest, and I don't think it needs leveling. It just needs a good polish up. There's not particular wear on there which needs to be dealt with. There is some wear on the board itself, as you can see. We've got some play wear in there on the ebony, well not the ebony, the rosewood. So we'll clean that up nicely. I'm not going to take you through the entire process of all of them, but I will just show bits of them on time lapse. Okay, so we're on to the second neck now. So this is the 2010 wine red Telecaster. And as you can see, the frets are pretty grotty. I've just cleaned up the first fret, and as you can see, it's pretty much unworn. So I'm going to check these for level, but assuming that they either don't need leveling from a high fret point of view, or that it's something I can deal with just on an individual fret basis. What I'm going to do with this is mask it off and then attack it with some fret rubbers and polish these up and get them up to get them back to a decent standard. So the home straight, or perhaps saving the best till last. So this is the USA neck from 2001, and it's, I think the reason why you pay the extra for a USA Telecaster or any USA Fender guitar is really the neck for me. So you can see, I think, quite clearly that the edges of the board are nicely rolled and that the ends of the frets have been beautifully finished. So it's just the quality of A, the materials, but B, the actual finishing of this guitar, which is what you're paying for. So you see the walnut plug, obviously. The nut itself has been really nicely shaped. And there's a little bit of play wear on the board itself. Um, but it's had a fret job. I think in the reasonably recent past, it is level, and there is just some tooling marks on the top of the frets, which I will polish out. But there's almost no wear, which when there's wear on the board suggests that it has actually had a fret job. So I'm going to tidy this up more than anything else and just get it properly polished, feed the board, and then we'll move on to reassembly. So close up look at some of the frets here. As I say, there's not much wear. There are some tooling marks from the last fret job. So what I've done is I've just had a quick go at the first fret with some fret rubbers just to clean them. And as you can see, yeah, it could do with a bit of a polish just to get rid of those tooling marks. But overall, there's no actual fret wear on it. So this will come up nicely. See the difference there hopefully quite clearly.
So here's the end results, starting off with the 2007 Sunburst and then the 2010 Midnight Wine Mexican. This is a fantastic colour, really nice red flecks under the right light, and then polar white for the Player Series. Classic look for any Tele. And then the chrome red USA. So this is a metallic over a silver base. It's similar to Candy Apple Red, but it's just a little bit lighter and it's absolutely gorgeous. So here we are, and now just a very quick canter through the specs. So the first difference is that the body is older in all cases, but it's got a polyester finish in the Mexican models, whereas it's polyurethane in the American one. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the difference is, but it does feel like a thinner finish on the American and it feels less plasticky, although I'm not sure why. The necks are all modern C profile, they're all 9.5 radius. The American neck has got a 42.86 millimeter nut as opposed to 42 mil, and it's slightly thinner down at the first fret. It's 20.7 mil, whereas the others are over 21. So it does feel slightly flatter and slightly shallower, but there's not much in it. And of course, the player in the USA have got 22 frets. It's also got an actual bone nut on the American. And then the tuners, they are different on the American. They're actually shaler, and they're staggered. On the pickups, the Mexicans, they're all overwound. So you can see that the MIM standards, the ceramic ones, are 10K on the bridge and 8.2 or 8.3 on the neck. And then very similar 10K on Alnico 5 on the Player Series and 8.1K Alnico 5 on the neck of the Player Series. Whereas in the US model, they're both round about the 7. And, that's more of a kind of vintage wind. The the higher output ones are a bit more sort of like a Texas special kind of output. So that's definitely a difference. Wiring's the same, switch is the same, bridge is very similar. The Player Series that I've got here is bent steel saddles, but actually after that, I think it was upgraded back to the same steel block saddles as the earlier MIMs, whereas the USA has got the stainless steel ones. So as we can see from the specs, there's not really that much difference between them. There is a bit of a kind of logical progression. So the early 2000s Mexican standards, both of these are pretty much identical apart from the colours. Real nice guitars, very good quality. They've held up well. These are 15, 18 years old. They've scrubbed up beautifully. They're really good, really, really good value guitars in today's market. And bearing in mind that a new Player Plus is about £800 in the UK, these 500-ish in this kind of condition. Excellent value for money, I would say. And the thing that people criticise about them was, I think, mainly the pickups. And, people are quite divided about them. Ceramic pickups felt to be, well, are a cheaper manufacturing option. They're a bit brash. We saw from the ratings that they are overwound, and you can certainly feel that and hear that when you play them. But I like that. That's part of the character, and yes, they're powerful, but they're also quite warm. So I actually like them. But I think the Player Series was the next step forward, and what people were saying at the time, and this is what 8 years ago now. But I recall people saying effectively what they were doing was producing in Mexico a Telecaster or a Stratocaster, which was essentially the same spec as early 2000s USA standards. And we've seen from the specs that's fairly true. Same wiring, Alnico 5 pickups, So that's a change up from the ceramics. Probably not the same ones as the USA ones, but you know, I mean, pickups are very subjective. They are nice, clear sounding pickups. They are overwound though, so they're quite high output compared to in the USA, as we saw, that's a more vintage output. But you know, that's what your volume control's for. Um, the difference, um, which is still not there though, is the neck. So yes, it's a step towards the USA one, but I think they definitely put in the extra time and effort and finishing on the necks of the USA models, and I see the same with Stratocasters. Um, and it's not massive, and partly it's a bit about, you know, are you looking for the value to justify the fact that you spent twice as much on effectively the same guitar? So there's a bit of that going on, and then I guess there's the intangible emotional bit. What is it worth to you to have a USA Fender Telecaster as opposed to a Mexican built one? In my case, I'm a huge fan of the Japanese ones, so I wouldn't necessarily say that all USA ones are better than all Japanese ones, and I wouldn't say that all Japanese ones are better than all Mexican ones. But you know, there's a reason for the price point difference. Part of it's about the labor cost to produce them. Part of it is about the quality of the finished end result. And for me, Mexicans are brilliant because really good bones, good structure, good components, and with a bit of extra finishing, they make brilliant, really good, usable, professional grade guitars. Um, you should expect that to be the case out of the box with a USA one. With a Mexican one, you're gonna probably have to get it set up by somebody like me to go through, do do all the extra finessing on the setup and the fretwork. Um, but you know, they are really good guitars. So I'm not here to evangelize. I just wanted to show the difference between the various ones here. I hope you found that interesting. These are all for sale, so they might not be by the time you see the video, but these will all be appearing on my Reverb shop in the next few days. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that, and hope we'll see you back in the shack soon.